Well, hello everyone. My mic is in my face. How are you doing? I hope you're having an awesome night. I'm actually quite excited for this show. And those of you who know how paranoid I am about having lipstick on my teeth, right before I started the show, I looked in the mirror and I freaking had lipstick all over my teeth. That is like enough to make me eternally paranoid. I know you guys would tell me, but you know how freaked out I get over the idea. Let me check one more time. Nope. I got some very transferable pink lipstick on that apparently wants to be on my teeth, but I know you guys, we're all friends here. You would tell me. You would tell me if I had lipstick on my teeth. Okay, so before we get started with today's show, and I've got some things lined up for you. I'm spilling the liberty. Definitely here. Let's do the YouTube stuff first, because I need to be a good YouTuber. So first of all, and I did change my closing patron screen, and then I realized when I mixed down the video, it didn't have any audio, so the theme music isn't with it. So it's still the old Patreon screen. But really this year, if it is one of your goals to support creators that you enjoy, I would truly, truly appreciate it. And it would be a blessing to me if you would support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I was just talking with Wayne about this earlier today. A funny joke people have said to me. Well, first part's not funny, and the second part I thought was funny, where they had said they learned more from me about how the Libertarian Party works than they ever learned in their state parties or local parties for years. Like, there's people who've been in the party forever, and it's like, I've learned more from watching your show. But what someone had said to me that I thought was really funny is they said to me, "How did you learn all that without you?" And you want to know what my answer to that is? Weaponized autism. That's my answer to that. So if you are learning more than, you've learned before from me about the inner workings of the LP and how things work and just the educational aspect, I would truly appreciate you supporting me on Patreon. Next, you can always follow me on Facebook, Twitter. I'm not even counting that last one. Fidalgo Files asked if I've recovered from profanity-laced tirades about the thought of Trump coming to the LP. I'm going to end up doing a show on that because I have some advice for state parties. And if this kicks state parties' butts to get in gear to do some things I've recommended for a while, it'll be worth it. And no, I won't. I don't recover from profanity-laced tirades ever. But I have recovered from that one. I put it to productive use. But if those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Twitter. Twitter is where I do my profanity-laced tirades. So go follow me on Twitter, Karen Ann Harlos. And lastly, I would appreciate you hitting that subscribe button, and it helps improve my visibility. Okay, I think that might be it for the intro for this show as far as the YouTuber stuff. But I have another intro to do to the subject matter. I know long-ass introductions, people don't crap. I cursed in the first. Hopefully that doesn't kill my monetization. All super chats matter, particularly if you are going to enjoy what I'm talking about this evening. I will be naming some names in the show. I don't normally like naming names, but enough has happened in the past couple years, and enough has happened to cure me from my policy of before never naming names. Now I just rarely name names because this is history. Everyone already knows who the players are. It's no secret. But what prompted this show today, I'm not going to name was, first, I don't want to amplify voices that I don't agree with or that I think are just destructive. But unnamed persons. And it was one particular one today, but this happens with enough regularity, who are trying to rewrite history, talking about, oh my God, be still my little heart. I miss the old LP messaging. What? That crap messaging. Okay, we're going to go over what the old just meaning the past 2 terms, LP messaging was. And if you miss that, I feel bad for you because it was utter crap. Okay? Now, am I saying the messaging this term is perfect? No. There's been messaging I haven't agreed with. And I've expressed it through the proper channels. And I think the few times I've disagreed, it's actually improved greatly. Whenever a whole new team takes over, there are some growing pains. And nobody is perfect, particularly on social media. The story that I like to give is a big misstep that I once made on social media. I've told this story before. I tend to repeat stories. This was an inadvertent error, but it's my most embarrassing moment when I used to do national social media. There's a quote. It ends up being a tweet or a Facebook post that goes around freedom circles a lot. And it isn't attributed to anybody. And out of context of where it originally appeared, it sounds pretty good. And it's something to the extent of, you know who's really in charge by whoever it is you can't criticize. Now, in isolation, that quote sounds great until you find out that it was originally a quote in the context of some great Jewish conspiracy. And it's just a deeply anti-Semitic quote. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh my God, I just tweeted that Facebook post that from the national account. And of course, we deleted it because obviously I didn't know the original context in which it was said. And I have zero desire to be saying anything like that. So it's very easy to have missteps. And 99.9% of the time, they're inadvertent, but I'm not going to pretend like every single message that's been put out this term has been perfect. Every single message I've ever put out, as the example I gave, hasn't been perfect. But has it been astronomically better? Yes, without a doubt. And we're going to relive some history because I'm not going to let people rewrite history. And if they are, in fact, proud of what I bring up today, well, we then just fundamentally disagree. But I want us all not to have on these rose-colored glasses that things were really great the past 2 terms, because they categorically were not. And in the instances in which they were bad, it wasn't a flub. It was a sustained and deliberate pattern. So first, we're going to go back to 2019 or thereabouts. This was before Joe Bishop Henchman was chair. It was at the time Nick Sarwark was chair. Now, I want you guys to remember, because people forget, 2016 to 2018 was a very peaceful LNC term, despite having the piece of shit vice presidential candidate Bill Weld, and for the first part of the 2016 term. It was very peaceful. At that time, I thought Nick was probably the best chair this party had. I think Nick has the dubious honor, of being both the best chair we've ever had and likely the worst chair we've ever had, though JBH comes in close, if not worse. So he's been at the extremes. But 2016 to 2018, Nick was a good chair. However, the seeds of where he was going were apparent. For instance, he wouldn't speak against or in support of rights of the Masterpiece Bakery in Colorado to be able to have freedom of association. You don't have to agree with his associative decisions, but we should have defended it, and he refused to. And in fact, very slyly well, maybe I'm saying sly, but he was pretty open about it, so maybe it wasn't terribly sly. Basically was starting to make the argument that businesses don't have the right to serve whom they wish. I should have seen it coming then. Another quick story to tell you, Nick and I were both at the Oregon Convention, and anyone who was there, and I think it was 2018, the 2018 Oregon Convention, where somebody asked him about UBI, and he spoke of it favorably. And I gave him a look like, what? And so were the people on the Oregon board were like, what? You know, and he sat down next to me after he got done talking. And he goes, you're not happy with me, are you? You know, and Nick also told me that really in an ideal world, he doesn't really care about taxation as long as it's low enough. And I think the number he gave me was 10%. So just saying, the signs were there that Nick wasn't a thoroughgoing libertarian. But he was a good chair in 2016 to 2018. He was fair, at least as far as I could tell. Maybe I was new. But in 2019 is when things started to go very awry. So I'm going to play some clips from a show I did back when I used to have a podcast. I also had a YouTube channel, but I was mostly doing podcasting. And the name of the show, you can find it on my channel. And you could see that I'm very respectful to Nick. And he's one of the people I'm referring to in the show. And I don't refer to him by name. But the name of the show is The LP Needs to Check Itself Before It Wrecks Itself. So if those of you who think that this is just some kind of new thing where I'm ass mad because the LNC railroaded me in 2021, no. I've been getting more and more critical ever since 2018. So I'm going to play the first clip for you, and we're going to start and stop it quite a bit. And man, after looking at this clip, I'm like, I need to go on a diet. I was so thin then. Probably a little bit too thin. When you see it, you're going to be like, holy shit, you're a freaking skeleton. But I need to lose some weight. But I'm getting older, and it gets tougher to lose weight as you get older. But here's the first clip. There's going to be, I think, 4 clips from that show called the LP Needs to Check Itself Before It Wrecks Itself. And hello, JJ, you're going to see a blast from the past. And you're going to see I haven't changed. I'm like ruthlessly consistent. But let's go. And boy, was there a shitstorm over the weekend that I just feel I need to comment about. And one reason I feel I need to comment on it is that it typified a growing discomfort, dissatisfaction problem I've been having in the LP, or at least in the LP as it deals with social media. And I'll get into that in a minute. So this, I believe, is entitled The LP Needs to Check Itself Before It Wrecks Itself. My original working title was The LP Needs to Stop Acting Like the Incel of Political Parties. This is not a commentary I wanted to give. This is my people. This is my tribe. This is my passionate love. But we have a severe personality disorder to come to grips with. Over the years, this party has given itself whiplash, pandering first to one side and then to the other. And sometimes we even do the splits, trying to pander to both. It's not a good look, and it's not our purpose. We have a popular graphic that we push, demonstrates, I think. Okay, I'm going to stop 1 second. There is some connectivity issues here. Sorry about that. It's on the original video. It's not on this one. But it's so funny for me watching this. This is when I first started my channel. I didn't have a studio yet. You see, I'm in my bedroom. I don't even have a desk in that part of the room anymore. I now have a home office where it's over there. So it's just funny. Our window seat's not installed yet. It's like, oh my God. But look how freaking skinny I am. It's crazy how skinny I am here. But what I'm complaining about is the hard left turn of the LP. But let's continue. Weird capriciousness. I'm sure you've seen it. It gets posted everywhere, and hopefully it'll be used as graphic for this episode. It's that thing that has the 4 columns, and it has positions on the left and on the right, and then there's this like intersection in the middle where we, the libertarians, allegedly dwell, where we agree with some things on the left and we agree with some things on the right, and it gives everyone the impression that we're the middle ground, the reasonable view. But we're not middle ground. We are not moderate. And in today's political sensibilities, we are not reasonable. That graphic is a bait and switch loss leader, as they say in retail. It's the lump of coal on Rudolph's nose. An honest depiction would put our intersections at the far ends of the spectrum. Inasmuch as left and right are even useful anymore, we are further left on social issues and further right on economic issues than both the right and the left. But that isn't even helpful anymore to look at it that way. There isn't even a real right and real left anymore, at least that we can relate to. I think perhaps for libertarian purposes, the terms conservative and liberal are better terms. And those aren't even perfect because classical liberals were not, economic spendthrifts. But it's better than left and right, I think, conservative and liberal, because the left today is now running with its skirts lifted to socialism, communism, collective identity struggles, and the right is goose-stepping over to nationalism, identitarianism, and protectionism. In mainstream American politics, classical liberalism and classical conservatism is dead. For all intents and purposes, it's dead, at least as a majority voice. We keep pretending as if they're not. We keep pretending as if the Democratic Party is liberal and the Republican Party is conservative, and they're not. And we have close to nothing in common with either of those groups any longer. And this is another pretense I think we need to drop. What we need to appeal to is what we have in common with the people. Forget about the parties, with the core of the human spirit. And in the same way, the American Declaration of Independence did. That beautiful Declaration of Rights appealed to the inner core of man, and it did not pretend to have things in common with the king and with monarchy. And there is a good lesson to be learned there. And right now, and I would love to say it's just social media or just people who are not really involved with the party goals and the like, we are desperately courting progressive identity politics in the Libertarian Party. Now, I want to stop right here a second. So this is when the LP really started going hard for progressive identity politics. Now, some people will go, oh, but you're doing identity politics today. False equivalence. I don't really care for it even when it's done today. But reacting against identity politics is not doing identity politics. It's just like if someone breaks into your house and you beat the living crap out of them, you have not initiated violence. You are reactive. That is defensive. Reacting against the absolutely aggressive identity politics today is not engaging in identity politics. It's defending against it. Then the two are not the same. We have been welcoming, arms wide open, smoochy, to the far left, to our detriment and to our peril. And I know when I say this, there is always a few people who will laugh at me, some of them my friends. Those people who think it's the alt-right that's the biggest threat to us, that there's a Nazi underneath every port. Now remember, this is right after Charlottesville as well. So you have to take it in context. And what prompted this episode that I'm doing, though I'm not going to be playing any of that, is the way Nick and some in the party went after the Covington Catholic kids. And basically they were just brutal, like picking on and bullying these kids when that kid was not the at-fault person. The Native American elder in that video was the at-fault person. But that's the background for this monologue that I'm giving. We're not going to get into the details of that incident, but that's what just threw me over the edge to start speaking out against the leftism of the Libertarian Party in 2019. Fine. Whether or not there are alt-right sympathizers in our membership, and there are, the national leadership and every state leadership that I am aware of has made it clear that such ideology is not welcome. The National Party even put out a mailer inviting anyone with those sympathies to leave the party and not the door, hit them with the good Lord split them. I don't think we've ever done this in the past. I think that was, maybe we have. As I dig through history, maybe I'll find it. But I was proud of us at that moment. So anyone who would like to say that the Libertarian Party is a willing breeding grounds for the alt-right has to be purposely dishonest. We've made that crystal clear. There's no other way around it. But we need to do the same with the far left. And we have failed to do the same with the far left. And because of this, the far left has felt quite welcome in our membership. And national leadership continues to court them. And when I say national leadership, I'm speaking in general. Obviously, that isn't true of every single person. I'm in national leadership, and I don't do that. But we are a group, in this sense, there is a collective, I guess, that has a responsibility. And I can't simply say, not me, I speak in general. And even though I don't do this, and I can think of a few other people that don't do this, none of us speak for the party. I'm only speaking for myself. So I don't know how much good that does. I mean, a few months ago, the very idea of basic foundational property rights could not even be affirmed by the current LNC. So there was a resolution on the LNC list to affirm property rights, and it fucking failed. And there's been no open repudiation of socialist theories of property and labor. We openly repudiated the alt-right. Why are we so shy about openly repudiating the far left? The early party wasn't shy about it. In fact, that was one of the first concerns. We'll be getting to that in LP News on Pink Flame of Liberty on my YouTube channel, is Nolan, when he would tell people that we were home to the libertarian left, people freaked out. And he said, "You're misunderstanding me. I don't mean economic left. We don't have a thing to do with that. I meant the social left," which wasn't progressivism back then. This has never been in question. We had an avowed communist on stage at convention. What could have prevented that? I don't know. I don't have the answer. And I think the cure would be worse than the disease. And so I have opposed any top-down control. I don't like top-down control. And though you might trust the LNC you got this time, you might not be able to trust the one you get next time. But I can bet you one thing. Someone would have come up with an answer if that had been Christopher Cantwell or Augustus Invictus trying to get up on stage. And I think we all know it. We are losing our grounding and our soul with this. The common member sees it. Those, and just in general, let's move away from the alt-right, far-left stuff. Just in general, those who dare to advocate what we ostensibly believe are mocked and marginalized. Okay, That's it for that clip. So you can see I was starting to get very, very outspoken. There was and we're going to, let me go back to the full screen here. There was a very leftward turn in the LP back then. And I confronted Nick about it on the phone. Wayne was sitting right next to me. He only heard my side of the conversation. Nick now denies this conversation ever happened, and he's lying. And I said, Nick, members are super concerned that you are steering this party hard left. And he said, it looks that way because that's exactly what I'm doing. And I said, Nick, you know I'm going to oppose you. And he said, Ms. Harlos, you are going to do whatever it is you think you need to do. And anyone who knows Nick knows that that's the way he talks, and that's exactly what he said. And Wayne heard my side of the conversation. It was pretty obvious what was going on just from hearing my side, and he remembers it. But we need to get a little sound clip here that will, where is it at? Just for old time's sake.
Yes, Ms. Harlos. Yes, Ms. Harlos.
That was from the 2020 convention when he was getting really irritated with me. There's about 15 times he said that, but that was the best one. Yes, Miss Harlos. But let us not forget.
Unauthorized recording.
Okay, so yes, the party was going hard left. Now, if hard left is what you prefer, then I guess you do think the messaging of the past 2 terms was better. I think the far left sucks, just like I think the far right sucks. You want to know what I like? Hard libertarian. That's what I like. But let's go to the next clip. Nowadays, if a white male gets assaulted, you ask what he's wearing. Seems to me we were opposed to that sort of thing when it was a different gender. Now, and what that's saying is because everyone was like, well, he was wearing a Trump hat. So, you know, that was that Covington kid's fault. So it's like, he shouldn't have went out dressed like that. What was he wearing? You know, the Libertarian Party platform says bigotry. Oh, this is funny. I want to stop this because this is why the bigotry is irrational Republican. I almost said again, though that can fit. Irrational and repugnant got deleted. Okay? That wasn't our platform. And it was used as a weapon. You wore a Trump hat. Therefore, you deserved it because you're irrational and repugnant. So I am pointing out the hypocrisy here in that our platform said that. Now, let me be absolute, and I wanted to play this clip for that fact because I wanted to show that I felt that should not be in our platform because it's thought policing. But I agree with the thought. I just don't agree with policing it. I believe bigotry is irrational and repugnant. However, it's being used as a weapon that everyone who disagrees with me is a bigot. And that's the way it was being used against the Coventry Catholic kids. So let's start this clip again, because I know some of the people who are big fans of the past terms are going to be like, oh, and it was so terrible, we deleted this, and I can't believe she's bringing it up. Hey, I didn't vote for that at convention. I didn't vote for any of the token things. But anyway, here we go. I just thought this was very relevant considering that's no longer in our platform, because I go on to quote another platform section. You know, the Libertarian Party platform says bigotry is irrational and repugnant, and it is. And that includes bigotry against young white Catholic teen boys. Last convention, we passed this into the platform. Libertarians reject the notion that groups have inherent rights. We support the rights of the smallest minority, the individual. And that is where the LP needs to check itself before it wrecks itself. Group identity, intersectional politics has nothing to do with individualism. Okay, so that was the beginning of the problems with the hard left turn of the LP. Now, back around 2008, the party was going hard right. So that's where I said we've given ourselves whiplash going from one extreme to the other when we just need to be hardcore libertarian. And I think for the most part, this term has done that. The problem is we've been so far left that saying actual libertarian things to some people seems right. It's not. If you go and read our social media, we dig on the right just as much as we dig on the left. And that's the way it should be. But in past terms, all you really saw was criticism against the right or conservatives or whatever you want to call it, and absolutely pandering to the left. That's not what I want to be a part of. And if you were a fan of that, you know, maybe the Forward Party is where you belong. Maybe the People's Party is where you belong, because this is the Libertarian Party. Now, let's move forward to COVID, because that's where the cracks. What's the period mean, JJ? Men don't get periods. Uh-oh, I shouldn't say that. Oh boy, I'm sure I'm going to get roasted for that, for saying something as common sense as you don't get period cramps either. Oh my God. Listen, I don't care what anyone wants to call themselves. I will respect your pronouns. I will, if I want to be around you, if you're a person that I like, I will respect whatever you want to call yourself. Okay, but, and here's the big but, and not everything that came before the but is bullshit, as Lord Stark would say. There are experiences of biological women, and it's starting to get really tiring that that's getting co-opted, where the fact that you can't even say anything. We're chest feeders now. We're pregnant people. It used to be called women. Like, can we stop the insanity? Anyway, I'm sure I'll get roasted for that, and that is fine. If I'm going to get roasted for saying something as simple as that, when I respect people, if it's someone I don't want to be around, I don't care one way or another, you know, what identity they have, what they want to be called. I don't want to be around them, so it's not my problem. But people I want to be around, I'm going to respect your personal identity. But I'm not going to deny reality that it's biological women that get periods. A uterus is required. That was something that caused a big storm on Facebook. Twitter. Anyway, so now let's move forward to COVID. That's where the cracks in the party really, really started to show. We utterly fell on our face. We barely spoke out against it. There was a tweet here and a tweet there, and even those sucked. There wasn't anything except for one article in March of 20... What year was it? So March of 2020 on lp.org. We absolutely fell down on the job. And that showed just how absolutely ideologically bankrupt we were. We're not now, but we were. And if you thought that was better to not get into COVID statement, like all of that crap, if that's the messaging that you preferred, that you thought was better, there is something absolutely wrong with you. Now, people are reinventing history again by saying, oh, but they came out with the Arty Against the Next Mandate campaign. No, they didn't. I did. That was my idea. That was one of the reasons my pushing for the party to start talking about COVID is one of the reasons I got removed. They won't say that, but it absolutely is. New Hampshire just brought a head to everything of me just not willing to be silent in the face of just the utter dissolution of our principles. But here's the beginning of where Artie Against the Next mandate came from. But to show you the utter bankruptcy of what was going on, we're going to play a segment of an LNC meeting that I've played before on this show. So this meeting was December 4th and 5th of 2020. You'll notice it's remote because even LNC members didn't want to meet in person. Now, I know they're going to say it's because our meeting was originally scheduled in California and additional mandates came. We could have moved it. LNC members, alleged radicals like Susan Hogarth, were pushing not to have our meetings in person, and we caved. We absolutely caved. And hindsight, like I even saw it then, but it's so much clearer now in hindsight what utter cowards we were. So as I play this portion of the LNC meeting, I'm going to comment through part of it. You're going to see that I haven't changed at all. And there were some people that were good on the issue. Most of those people are still on the LNC. There were some people who started to get crappier and crappier and who I would never elect to be in charge of, picking up dog crap in my backyard, who were okay at the time. You'll see there's some people that have become villains in the party that were okay at this meeting, that voted on the right side. But you'll see the usual suspects. You will see how utterly bureaucratic bullcrap that was going on at that time. So let's play this LNC meeting. And remember, time frame, December of 2020. No. Yeah, December of 2020. It was the budget meeting after the new LNC at that time with Joe Bishop Henchman. And boy, was there a shitstorm right here.
Next item on the agenda is Committee to Address COVID-19 Response by Ms. Harlos, 15 minutes.
Right, one moment. I want to pull this up here again. There's been a lot of discussion amongst membership, and I know people have a lot of different opinions on this. That we've been, I'm making an argument. I don't want to make an argument yet. So that was just an introduction. I'll say my motion, and if there's a second, I will give my argument. Establish a committee to work with staff and the party chair regarding the party's messaging in response to the violations of civil liberties by the state due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The committee shall comprise Karen Ann Harlos, Aaron Adams, Jeffrey Hewitt, plus one additional LNC member to be chosen by the party chair, and 4 non-LNC members to be chosen by the 4 LNC members of the committee. Okay, I want to stop right here because I want to give you the background for this. I had been complaining up and down that our response to COVID sucked, and we needed to do something about it. And I think it was Steve Dasbach who challenged me. Well, have you even made a motion? I'm like, I shouldn't have to make a freaking motion. But I'm like, okay, I'll make the motion, and I'll make it very reasonable. Like, this isn't what I actually wanted, but this is something that I thought was reasonable enough that I wouldn't be purposely laying a trap of something that I knew the more moderate members of the LNC couldn't pass. So all I was suggesting here, it's such a modest proposal that the fact that this didn't pass is batshit. All I was proposing was for a dedicated advisory committee to keep on top of what was going on with COVID, research good messaging, and advise the chair. This committee had no power. It was simply an advisory committee. Because one thing I recognized is staff did a lot of our messaging, and they have a million other things to do. that it was a lot of time for them to dedicate to doing good messaging on COVID. That if we had a dedicated committee that could write these things and then have them get approved by staff in the chair, it would take a huge workload off of them. Completely modest proposal. And it failed. And you'll see the arguments that they do against it. And it's absolutely, utterly ridiculous. But I knew it wouldn't pass. But I made it as passable as possible. And it didn't pass. 9 months later, I was removed, by the way.
Ms. Harlos has moved the language she just read to establish a committee to that effect.
I get so triggered hearing him.
Seconded by Mr. Longstreth. Is there objection?
I object.
There is objection, so we'll proceed to debate. Ms. Harlos, I'll recognize you first, and anybody else wish to speak, just raise your hand and I'll put you on the queue.
Okay, when you all hear my debate, you'll see I get a little bit spicy, but this is what's funny, because I was really, really irritated this meeting just by first the party's leftward turn and then its utter failure on COVID. But you'll see that I don't lose my cool, and I am utterly deferential to JBH, which I tend to be deferential to whoever the chair is in a meeting. Because while I can be spirited and spicy and mouthy, I'm not that way in meetings. I do get very passionate, but you will see the utter respect I show to JBH, which, you know, come to find out, he didn't deserve in the absolutely slightest. Like, at the time, even though I didn't agree with his ideology or his strategic plan, to be honest with you, I didn't think he was a bad chair. I just thought he was a boring one. But I didn't think he was corrupt or anything like that. So I maintained my respect for him. Now, of course, my opinion on that changed drastically once New Hampshire happened. But I think everybody felt that way, even some of the radical members. Now, so you'll see I'm pretty deferential in what I say. I'm very modest in my proposal, but I don't mince words either about the failure of the party. And by the way, JBH believed in mandatory vaccination. That's just a little background there.
Okay, and I'm sure I'm going to end up putting my hand up to address objections because I don't really know what they all will be, but I'm trying to anticipate them. I firmly believe, though I'm sure some people would say it's arguable, that what is going on right now is the biggest peacetime power grab and violations of our civil liberties. And the reason I say peacetime is I can imagine being a Japanese person interred and be like, yeah, really, you're upset. So I will just say peacetime. And we've been largely silent. And I think that's shameful. I didn't believe, like, I thought maybe I'm just getting old because I am. And I went and did a search on lp.org to see, surely we've said some things on this. The only article I could find was back in March. And it was a great interview. It was with Dr. Varner. But with my knowledge of the party's history, when violations of civil liberties had happened in the past, and I know we do not have a communications director at this time, but we would throw royal fits. Like I can show you press releases that we put out, very, very upset when teenagers weren't allowed to tan, when the low flow toilets were mandated. We got more upset about those two things than we've said about the entire economy crashing around people's heads, mass suicides from people whose futures have been completely stolen from them. I don't need to list all the violations, but the Party of Liberty being silent on this. But I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting we take any position on things that we are somewhat ignorant of, where none of us are scientists. What we need to talk about is the government power grab, not arguing over yes mask, no mask. What our arguments, in my opinion, should be is that people need to become informed and make their responsible personal decisions, but that this is not the role of the government. I don't want to get into looking like we're science denialists or whatever the insult of the day is, but just to be promoting our basic message of personal responsibility and the proper role of the state. I keep saying it's shameful of our response. That is too mild of a word. I don't think the English language has a word for the way we have abdicated our duty here. We've spent more time arguing about trivialities than about the complete destruction of what's going on right now. We're losing our country, literally. The most recent example of this I can give would be after 9/11, and we were very, very active in that. But we are AWOL on the job. And if the Libertarian Party isn't at the forefront of objecting to this, we should disband. Honestly, we have just become existing to have meetings and existing to perpetuate ourselves, not freedom. And I will address objections. I'll just get in line for objections.
Okay, I stand by everything that I said. Now, did it, I didn't lose my cool, I didn't cuss, but I do think that the English language does not contain a word for our absolute dereliction of duty. We ought to be like absolutely fucking ashamed of ourselves. And of course, it wasn't all of us, but just in general, this was our party. And you'll hear some of the arguments against it. It is bureaucratic bullcrap. And I'm glad to say that at least two of the people who were so strongly against it ended up resigning after my exposure of New Hampshire. No principles. But there are some people who turned out to have no principles who are actually good on this issue. And I'll give them credit as they speak. But when you just hear the arguments against this, you're like, really? Knowing what we know. And listen, in December 2020, we knew an awful lot then too. Just like I said, the economy, the people that were killing themselves, the children whose future was being stolen, that now they have permanent developmental handicaps that you'll never get past. Because certain formative years of your life, you don't regather that. Where you don't see human faces around you, you just see masks. It's just absolutely batshit. We could have been the thought leaders on this. We were an utter embarrassment. And for an LNC that fell down on the job like this, even though it was super traumatic for me, it was a fucking honor to get removed by them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlos. Let me just read. There's a lot of hands up, so let me just read the order so everybody knows what the order is. I have Ms. Bilyeu, Mr. Roudset, Mr. Wendt, Ms. Ebke, Ms. Hogarth, Mr. Valente, Mr. Nikela, Mr. Coburn. So, Ms. Bilyeu.
Yeah, I think my question would just be specifically what would they do, and would they have authority to actually release, to publish press releases, or what do you see the actions being taken by this committee? Are they just going to advise us on what we should be saying and then we still have to delegate it to someone else? Or how do you see this actually playing out?
May I answer, Mr. Chair?
Ms. Harlos.
It's an advisory committee. So it would be, because the staff has a lot of other things to do. And if you had a committee dedicated to wordsmithing and giving specific examples, it would still have to be approved by the party chair. It's an advisory committee that would take on the dedicated work to give the nuanced responses, because staff just simply doesn't have time to do that right now. And I would say probably the chair doesn't either. So it's advisory only. They are not empowered to do anything unilaterally.
Ms. Bilyeu, did that answer your question?
Yes, and just there's a comment from Ms. Hogarth in the chat saying that we already have a committee to do this, and I'm not clear.
And it's funny that Hogarth, the alleged radical, was speaking out against this. She was on the alleged messaging committee and didn't bring forth anything about this because she was too busy trying to keep us from having in-person meetings. The fucking radical. Okay, I wouldn't admit that there was already allegedly a committee for this, because that committee obviously didn't do shit.
which one she thinks that is. I'm trying to sort that out, but does a committee that could do this already exist is a question I have, I guess, for the chair.
Was that rhetorical, or do you want an answer from me?
No, I would like an answer. I'm trying to decipher this right now because I'm not on our list one that might do that. But
so my answer would be two. I think we do have. I mean, we obviously have a chairs committee on media and messaging. I think it would fall within their area of. They would be able to do it if they want.
But they hadn't. That's the whole point.
But secondarily, and I said this in my chair's report, everybody on this call, every libertarian can give me advice. And
yeah, and it needed to be publicly done. Yeah, JBH, we could give you advice. I tried doing that. You're going to claim here nobody had said anything to you. That is not true. Whatever. You deleted all your emails, so I guess we can't prove it. But there were personal conversations. There were conversations. And you shouldn't have to advise the chair of the Libertarian Party that you should speak out against the COVID mandates if not every day, like regularly. It is insane. And yes, Hogarth was acting as a roadblock. Absolutely was acting as one. And she was one of the people who was running scared of COVID during this time.
Do whenever you want. Without the existence of a committee. And, on an almost daily basis, somebody sends me, hey, this article is neat. Hey, this thing is neat. Hey, this thing is neat. And we share it. And then it's
not a matter of just sharing things. It was a matter of us having our own messaging and being the thought leaders. Way to miss the point. God, he was so frustrating. And I see it much more clearly in hindsight. I don't try to be confrontational with the chair. Some people might think, oh, this is kind of status of you. I respect the authority structure in the party.
Just clarify this in the chat. APRC, they're a veto point on stuff. They don't produce content. So that's why I wouldn't think.
Yeah, here's what's so funny. Some people in chat were saying, well, the APRC could do this. How can you be on the LNC and not even know the role of the APRC? JBH is correct. The APRC is just a veto committee.
Would be the natural fit for this. Does that answer your question, Ms. Billieu? Okay. I have Mr. Raudsep and then Mr. Wendt. Mr. Raudsep?
Thank you. I'm not against the idea of messaging in this regards, and actually I think...
I'm going to stop here a second. I love Eric. He's a friend of mine, but he was completely out of his tree here. And we'll talk about it afterwards. But I want to let you know that the criticism I have of him here is not a criticism against him as a person. Eric is a dear friend of mine. We don't always all get things right. He wasn't one of the people who was a terrible LNC member. He truly wasn't.
Ms. Harlos has a very valid point that we have been oddly quiet on this. However, I'm against the creation of an official committee to do this, especially if the LNC votes to create this committee. And I see this as a temporary issue.
Yeah, really temporary. Oh my God, Eric, you were so missing the mark here. And I'm just going to intro this a bit, and then we'll let him speak. I think he's going to, if I remember correctly, he's going to go on to say, we should have a committee that is like an emergency response committee to all kinds of issues, not just COVID, as if COVID wasn't the biggest freaking thing, like way to like major on the minors. And yeah, having a permanent committee to address like school shootings or whatever that might go on is a great idea. You didn't make the motion, dude. Don't kill the committee that we need now. You could always amend it later. To kill a good thing because you want a better thing, when you didn't move to amend it and you hadn't ever moved this idea before, is the perfect example of letting the perfect be enemy of the good and allowing us to be silent again. We were silent after this.
At least I hope COVID-19 is a temporary issue. And if a committee like this is needed, well, then it is still the chair's prerogative to create.
And this is another thing. While I respect the authority of the chair, there is a lot of brown nosing that goes to whoever the party chair is on every term. The chair isn't the king of the party. The chair doesn't run the party. The fucking LNC runs the party. Oh, this just gets me so frustrated. And that's why I sometimes rub people the wrong way, because I wasn't about to abdicate my officer role and my role as an LNC member just to the almighty chair. The delegates elect an entire LNC of 17 people, it could be up to 18, for a reason. And it isn't just that it's the chair. The chair is not the monarch. And I love you, Eric, but you were wrong here.
Advisory committee for himself in this regards without any need for the LNC to vote.
But he didn't do it. When the chair fails his responsibility, it's the responsibility of the LNC to take some control. And this was such a minor motion. It didn't overrule the chair at all. Let me tell you about another advisory committee that was formed in 2016. It was the Gary Johnson Campaign Advisory Committee. And actually, it was formed at the urging of the Gary Johnson campaign, which I found out, through experience later. It was just to pacify us. But we were unhappy with his bake the cake messaging and things such as that. And his no, we don't want to legalize all drugs, that in order to pacify us, his campaign manager was like, well, why don't you guys form a committee that could help us with our messaging? Which we did. It was just an advisory committee. I was on it. And basically the response of the campaign when we gave them advice was basically, fuck you, we're not going to follow your advice. It was just to pacify us. But so it's this committee, the chair could have still said no, but I wanted to do at least something. The membership wanted it.
So I don't see the rationale.
I think Eric would feel differently today.
To create via vote this committee. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roudsep. I have Mr. Wendt and then Ms. Ebke.
Oh,
Mr.
God,
Wendt.
he was such a terrible LNC
thank you,
member.
Mr. Chair. So I have a few issues with this motion and the creation of this committee. First, I'm not a real big fan of single-use committees.
Talk about not knowing what committees are for. Single-use committees are the most common kind of committee. That is, in fact, the primary use of committees, is single-use committees. Say you are utterly ignorant of Robert's Rules of Order, Mr. Wendt, without saying you're utterly ignorant of Robert's Rules of Order and how parliamentary and deliberative societies work.
I realize that's what ad hoc committees come from, but if
No no offense to you, Sin Shadowland. We could have hoped so, but particularly people on the national level, and I'll address this in my rebuttal that comes at the very end. Nothing is ever temporary with government. And we had already been through this for over a year. There was no reason to think it was going to end anytime soon.
look at the traffic that I've been putting forward, it's about trying to reduce our single-use committees and kind of stop some of the crossover. And what I see with this committee on messaging, it's a single-use committee, and it's going to cross over into items in the budget that we just passed. I mean, we're looking for a communications director.
And their other excuse is that we were going to hire a communications director and they would handle that. This committee would assist the communications director. And we ended up not hiring a communications director. Crap, we could look it up. When was Gabby Cordova? I think, was it Gabby or is Gabby? No, I'm getting confused. Gabby wasn't. Crap, I'm like losing it. Let's forget about names for a second because I'm getting old. We didn't hire our communications director to 3 or 4 months later. If I remember correctly, it might have even been longer than that. You want to know how much messaging we missed out in those few months? That you don't do something because something else is going to happen? And that committee would have then assisted the communications director. And the communications director at the time, I'm pretty sure it was Gabby, wasn't I? Can't remember now. Oh my God. When I brought to her the already against the next mandate, which we'll get into how that originated, she was so grateful and ran with it, because one person can't be expected to come up with all these ideas and research. Single-use committees are bad. Oh my God, you didn't know what the hell you were talking about. And you never conferred with Region 1 on this, Mr. Region 1 representative. Colorado would have given you an earful.
Not officially, yeah, that's all up on employment, but that's one of our goals. So are we going to just kind of undercut that right from the start? And then, yes, there is the Media and Messaging Chairs Advisory Committee. So, and then my third real issue with this is that the specifically naming of LNC members.
So his other objection is that I named specific people to the committee. I named specific people to the committee because it was people from various points of view in order to gain support. Naming people to a dedicated committee to a specific purpose generally is part of the motion. It's so funny that he was objecting that I didn't name person who were COVID ass kissers to the committee. You'll go, oh, if you named Valerie Sarwark to the committee, it'd be a different kind of committee. Yeah, it would, because she was a COVID ass kisser.
Takes the kind of the vote out of it. If I were to amend this to say to strike the names listed and list Laura Ebke, Valerie Sarwark, and Jared Hall as the
COVID ass
kissers,
kissers,
the composition of the committee, and I do believe it would. So I think that this committee is not necessarily fully formed, and I think it can be accomplished through other means.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. I have Ms. Ebke and then Ms. Hogarth. Ms. Ebke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you're going to become infuriated here. She makes it sound oh so reasonable because, you know, she's just oh so respectable and former senator and blah, blah, blah. She's the one who lied her ass off in the alleged removal motion with me. Fuck her. She is going to say, though she'll make it sound oh so reasonable, that we need to stay in our lane.
And I would echo what Mr. Wendt just said, except that I don't want to be on the committee. So please don't nominate me. But I do.
That's
because
she did no work when she was on the LNC.
About creating a committee.
Just to stop. Everyone who thought that it was so wonderful to put a former senator, you know, because clout chasing and all that crap. She did nothing when she was on the LNC. Her biggest accomplishment was putting her name on the removal motion against me that was not written by her. She did nothing. She volunteered for nothing. And when I say that, you could probably point out one or two things she did, not compared to other LNC members. She is a lazy as fuck at-large member.
That is of a particular use, short-term use, and you know, that's a concern. The other concern that I would have is that
what the hell is the problem with a single-use committee? The problem is that we multiply committees that stick around forever. A single-use committee is great.
So far, we really don't have any significant nationwide actions for the national party to complain about. I like to see us stay in our lane. Every state has different regulations, and you know, there are real.
So should we not speak out against ballot access laws because they're state specific, Miss Ebke?
Lockdowns in some places. There are you know, mask mandates in some places, and in some places those things are just highly suggested. So and
shouldn't we be praising the areas? So if a state party was in favor of mandates, we're supposed to, as a national party, be silent? Yet you had no problem coming against New Hampshire. But the fact is there was no state party in favor of mandates. And we could easily have piggybacked on some state party messaging. Colorado's messaging was great. Even though I didn't care for the Colorado board at that time, one thing they were great at was COVID messaging. And the National Party did nothing to support us. Nothing.
I prefer to see the federal, the National Party kind of stay in our own lane and not try to issue broad statements about what's going on when in many states that's not going on.
Great. But what about the states it was? I'm sure that members felt so represented by you at large. Stay in our lane, Epke. Why don't you stay in your lane and not try to remove an officer that was duly elected by the delegates? Stay in your lane.
I would object as well to the naming of a particular committee members. Those committee members are all perfectly able to contact the chair to provide advice, I think. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Epke. I have Ms. Hogarth and then Mr. Valente. Ms. Hogarth?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have your the mandates to the Chair Advisory Committee.
So, yeah, but your advisory committee wasn't doing anything.
So I was looking for it, but I can't find it. I'm just wondering what the Marketing and Media Subcommittee, if this does fall within its purview. I think it is an important issue and we should address it. I have the same concerns that others have expressed about creating.
If you thought it was important and we should address it, why didn't you? And why go, well, maybe let's address it another way? The problem was we weren't addressing it at all. Why are you shooting down the one time we actually addressed it or attempted to in a meeting?
A committee
so radical
from the people who want it to be created. If it is created, I'd like to be on it. I think
fuck no.
We have to, be very careful about wording. But
you mean how careful you were about wording in the removal motion against me, in which you said words are violence, and you voted for it?
Do you have right in front of you? Sorry, the mandate for the Marketing and Media Committee?
I don't have it in front of me. It's generally providing oversight of our messaging and outreach and public relations activities, and presumably when we have a communications director, working with that person to review their plans and proposals and everything. So that would be the gist of it.
Okay, so yeah, I guess my concern is that we have a tail wagging the dog situation here. Sorry for the cliche. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. I have Mr. Valente and then Mr. Nicola.
Another
Mr.
piece
Valente.
of shit.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So I will somewhat echo a lot of what Mr. Wentz said, that I'm not a fan of single-use committees. I think
These people have no idea what they're talking about. That's the primary purpose of committees, is to refer questions to them. My God.
We can start them up, but we always have problems ending them.
And way to show again that you are ignorant. We've never had a problem stopping an ad hoc committee because they expire naturally if we don't terminate them early at the end of each term. So many committees have been started, they turned out not to be good ideas, and they just weren't renewed. Way to show you do not know Roberts, you do not know our policy manual or our history.
I think this would have been better if we had come up with this committee 6 months ago.
We were fuck-ups before, so let's remain fuck-ups.
10 months ago. I think that we're on the back nine, and by the time we get this committee fired up, many of the concerns we can address some of the things that had happened, but I just don't think that.
COVID was almost over. Okay. That didn't age well.
By the time we get this committee up and functioning, and plus the fact that it's just an advisory committee will serve any purpose other than to create another layer of the onion. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Valente. I have Mr. Nicola.
Another person who
Mr.
did
Coburn.
nothing.
Mr. Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'd love to see this committee happen.
Now, Stephen Nicola is great. And notice Stephen Nicola is still on the LNC.
And if you've lived in an area with lockdowns or county ordinances or any of those sorts of things, I just spoke to a gentleman yesterday that went to jail for refusing to wear a mask on Duval Street, to give you an idea of the situation we have here in the Florida Keys. Regardless of whether or not this passes, I'm in favor of the LNC members getting together if we do act in the advisory role, and I'd love to be a part of this because I do believe the party should be stepping up and being at the forefront of this issue, as we are the party of liberty. We should be having much more of a voice in the media through our channels when it comes to this. This year alone, I've been on Telemundo, MSNBC, The Tom Woods Show, local media, and more, just because I've been engaged in the issue with the Libertarian Party of Florida. And I think that if we did create a committee in official capacity, we would have a little bit more punch when it comes to perhaps helping to get the media on board, or saying, hey, you have a personal story, submit it to this the committee, on the COVID committee in the Libertarian Party, etc., which could be valuable. I'm sure we could find other ways. And granted, this committee would only be a standing committee, so it would only be around till the end.
Okay, he used the wrong term, not a standing committee, an ad hoc committee. Standing committees are actually permanent, but whatever. We all flub our terminology. But it's funny how Laura Ebke, Mrs. Stay in her lanes, not listening to the state chair of Florida.
Term regardless, since it's not something that's official within our bylaws. So it would be temporary. We have done temporary committees before on things like social media process review committee, which I helped write the motion for back in, 2016. So we do these things time to time. I think our response hasn't been great. I think until we get a communications director in, we really haven't had a strategy on how we're going to address COVID. And I think that, like I said, regardless of whether or not this passes, I'd be happy to get with the people that are interested in putting something together, because we do need a more directed strategy on COVID. There is a lot of opportunity there, I believe. With a lot of what's going around in the country, we should be in California right now, but we're not. We're here on Zoom because Governor Newsom and the terrible, hypocritical laws that are being put into place over there, as well as other places. So I would like to capture the opportunity. Whether or not this passes, I definitely would like to get together with the others. And even if we're an unofficial, we'll call it ad hoc or just an LNC get-together group, I think that would even be sufficient.
Just as a preview, and I know this is a long show, and it's probably going to go a bit longer because I have another subject to address, but I'm not going to allow history to be rewritten. You saw, except for Steve Nicolas, the first one, though there'll be a couple others, the response has absolutely been terrible by the LNC. These were our intrepid leaders. Just so you know, because the motion did fail, quite obviously, I did go on to have meetings on my own. And it was my independent group, which Stephen Nicola did attend meetings, that came up with the Already Against the Next Mandate campaign and gave the National LP a fully formed, full media campaign. They only used part of it. They did not use the whole package that I handed to them, even after I was removed, allegedly, which got voided. But because I still cared about the party, even if I couldn't stand the LNC. So we did go on to do it on our own. And after this meeting, after we came up with things, it nearly failed. The LNC didn't even want to hear what we came up with. I asked for 5 minutes on a future agenda just to give them an update on what the independent member committee was doing, and that almost got refused to be heard. They were so horrible.
But in whatever capacity, I do believe we should be at the forefront of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicola. I have Mr. Coburn and then Mr. Smith. Mr. Coburn.
Thank you.
Another terrible LNC member that voted to disaffiliate one of his own states and had to resign after that before he got removed.
Comments here, but just to echo off of Mr. Nicola's remarks, I think it would certainly be appropriate for the members that have listed themselves in this proposal to get together as a group and perhaps make a press release or some other resolution that we can consider as the LNC. To be frank, I think there are other major affronts to our civil liberties that have happened recently that we have not responded to by creating a committee, creating an advisory committee. I would point back, I mean, it's still ongoing, but the Black Lives Matter movement was really a hot button issue just a couple months ago, and we didn't make an advisory committee on that. So I think that this is
because the LNC was all over BLM and supporting BLM. There didn't need to be an advisory committee for that. And Casey Jones, I'm going to be taking care of that right now. Just give me 1 second. All right, that user is taken care of. Okay.
Blunt and to be frank, it seems like a committee for the sake of creating a committee. It seems like there is a...
Can you believe someone would say about tailoring our COVID response is a committee created for the sake of having a committee? Can you believe that? Disgusting.
A push here to have a committee that sounds official on the topic. And I'm against that. I would rather see us come with a proposal for a press release, come with a proposal for a resolution or a statement by the party, rather than just creating a committee.
That's what the committee would have done, dude.
And then Ms. Adams. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't find anything that I disagree with Karen Ann Harlos or Stephen Nikala on, for that matter. I do want to point out Mr. Robsep stated that we don't know if COVID is temporary or not. That's true. What we do know is that the government overreach is definitely not going to be temporary. Anytime we've had any kind of national action like this, that some of that tyranny always stays, depending on what the problem was. But I do think that the Libertarian Party is the only party that would push back on these government regulations. Obviously, the Democrats are pushing for more. The Republicans, there's some crazy QAnon people that are against this stuff, but their politicians continue to push for more. I think that the Libertarian Party needs to have.
So I think y'all are getting the idea. I think this is dragging on a little bit. Terrible messaging. Some good LNC members, they're still on there. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, though I'm not a fan of them as an LNC member. John Phillips was really good on this. John Phillips pretty much reamed them out, saying, if some people want to get together and do this, why are we stopping them? Like, you'd think I was asking them for money or something. So, because we're not going to get to his statements, I did want to give him credit because he was good on this issue. But I want to go to the end here for a closing statement I give, and the vote. So let's go towards the end.
Absolutely shameful. This
okay, wait, there's me giving my closing.
No shortage of individuals.
Okay, there's Joe Bishop Henchman obfuscating.
Well, as has already been mentioned, our goal is to bring on a communications director soon, which would help with on about an hour every week. Public policy. And whatever, no one cares, and no one should care. As far as rhetorical stuff to provide ammunition and support, well,
he's just given his excuses. I want to go to the vote, and then
all of the complaints and griping and social media animosity about how we're not doing this, that, or the other thing, nobody has yet stepped forward to, message or email or whatever directly.
That's what I'm doing right here, dude, and you're opposed to it. He was saying nobody cares about our messaging, just complaining about civil liberties. They only care about electing people, and that all of our messaging in the past didn't accomplish crap because people weren't elected. And I'm going to address that. You'll see.
Very easy to get a hold of with, hey, this article was great. Share this article. Or, hey, this op-ed is great. Share this.
Weren't talking about sharing.
Please send it. But LNC resolutions.
This isn't a resolution.
I don't really know what we're trying to achieve on that.
It's a committee.
No one's going to read those. But if we can, step up and do a lot of stuff. Now, another thing we can do is be more organized in some of the lobbying and legislative efforts that are related to this. And I'm hoping that the activism coordinator that we're planning on bringing on will help with that as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Harlow.
You had asked for a certain indulgence, and I would ask for an indulgence of 1 minute just to respond briefly to some of the items raised.
Certainly, Ms. Harlow.
Okay, I really appreciate it. A lot of people had mentioned, well, we could already be doing this, and we already have a committee, but the fact is we haven't done anything. We've had one statement since March, and that is just absolutely shameful. This hasn't happened. This is exceptional. I agree with Mr. Phillips, no matter what the issue is. When we had Bitcoin, we had somebody step up. What's the worst that happened? They don't do anything? The way everyone's so upset about forming a committee, I just think is honestly irrational. I'm sure there are rational reasons. I just don't understand them. I'm not trying to put anyone down, but we have a fiduciary duty. And I just have to say, I fundamentally disagree with the chair that the only goal, and I would say our bylaws disagree with the chair, that the only goal is electing candidates. We do not get members and activists if they do not see this organization as something that is putting forth a message they can believe in. We have activists getting burned out because they're tired of losing. We lose a lot of races right now. We can win on issues. To me, they are two-pronged. So I just respectfully disagree. I think Mr. Bishop Henchman is doing a tremendous job.
See how I'm kissing his ass a little?
Honestly, I'm thrilled with the job he's doing. But on this issue, and unfortunately, I think it's a fatal issue, we are ashamed to liberty. So I will be doing some things on my own, as people suggested. But Mr. Dazbak called me out and said, well, what motion have you made? Well, I made the motion. I predicted it would fail. I predicted the arguments that would be made, and I was proven right. Unfortunately, I'm thoroughly disappointed in the committee.
Okay. That was thoroughly disappointed in that committee. Okay. So, yeah, that's the crap messaging that you thought was so great. No, that sucked. That absolutely sucked. And I loved what was said in chat, where JBH said, nobody notices press releases and social media posts. And it was said in chat, they certainly are noticing it now, all the same people that might have been in favor of that. And as I said, I normally don't like calling people out, and I did call specific people out because they were specifically terrible people. They were just terrible LNC members, and they were terrible people. And, every once in a while, we do have to call out the exceptionally terrible people. And I gave credit where it was due. I'm not a big fan of Mr. Phillips as an LNC member, but he was great on this issue. Wasn't that absolutely embarrassing? And no one could say that, I cussed people out or did anything. I was completely deferential to Mr. Bishop Henchman in my disagreement. So let's look at some of the messaging that I think came out after that, the crap messaging of the Libertarian Party. So let me pull up some Twitter posts here. You are essential. Okay, the first paragraph is actually pretty good. No virus can change that, and no government has the right to tell you otherwise while threatening your ability to earn a living or live your life. Actually, this was right before that meeting. This was 6 days before that meeting. Also, kiss government ass. It's a really good idea to wear a mask. Says who? How is that our job to tell people that? Avoid crowds and consider others during a pandemic. How about considering the children of other people that didn't get to see a human face? What the actual hell? What shitty messaging. And here's another doozy. While you're social distancing, consider looking into how you can create change in the world while we're able to return to normal life. When did that happen? No pushing back against the government. It was such ass kissy. but it's a good idea to wear masks. That is, you want to talk about not our lane? Giving medical advice wasn't our lane. Saying you are essential and no government can change that. That is our lane. The first paragraph was good. And what one hand gaveth, the other hand tooketh away. Now let's talk about some more crappy, sucking the toes of big government. They have a big government foot fetish messaging. And this was going to be a little bit more controversial. The messaging on January 6th. The LP at that time completely bought hook, line, and sinker the government spin on that. Meanwhile, during all the BLM riots, we couldn't even speak out against the property damage. I want to show you guys something. And I know some people can disagree with me, but it's my position that my words are my own. And while on certain, like I'd said this before on APRC, way after the fact, without revealing what other people can say, I can say what I said. So we're going back to 2021. There was a message put out by JBH that went through. I don't think I can show you without revealing what other people said, which is confidential. I own my own words. JBH put out a message that said, we pray for those who work in the Capitol. And this was a year later. Like, there was no danger to people who work in the Capitol. So after it passed APRC, I said, I was waiting for this to pass. Now I'm going to make my comment. Where were our concern and thoughts and prayers for the people who owned private property during the BLM riots? Because we couldn't be moved to do that. We were just too busy kissing ass. So one riot's a big deal and another riot's the other. And the absolute fact is some were far more damaging than the others. But we just bent over ourselves to swallow the Democrat narrative when it came to January 6th. Now, I'm not a fan of what happened there. But it wasn't an insurrection, and it wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to America. And it wasn't just the absolute hysteria that's been made. What's going on is that a political party in power is creating, by definition, a terrorist definition of their rival. And if you don't think they would do that to us, you're freaking insane. You have your head in the ground. They would do it to us in an instant. Yet we bought into that whole thing. And that is absolutely crazy. And that's another area in which our messaging sucked. Our messaging should have been consistently that political violence is not the answer. That destruction of property is not the answer. However, like a lot of people said, I'm going to be way more upset about the destruction of private property than I am going to be about a government building. And that the politicians that inflict violence on us on a daily basis once were a little frightened. Now, I don't think anybody should be ever threatened. I'm a pacifist. But if I have to put my concerns and worries on a scale, I am going to be more concerned for private property owners rather than politicians. And those same politicians that are completely wielding their power to spin a narrative, and the Libertarian Party bought into it absolutely, completely, and shamefully. Now, hold on one second, because I want to see if I can show you this without revealing anything. let's see where that is. So let me do a search here. And my Google screen, somehow I made it like so big, I can't read it. Let me do a search for January 6th. I want to search in that folder. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, I should have had this up. That's what she said. Yeah, here we go. I can screenshot it so that no one else's comments are viewed. Okay, so let me pull this up. Go to my desktop. So here's what I said, and I know you can hardly see that, but it says, I wanted to wait for this to be approved by others before commenting. Where was our thoughts for the safety of business owners and other property owners during the left-aided riots? All I wanted was consistency. But we bought into the whole insurrection narrative. Now, do I agree with Trump supporters? No. I've said quite honestly, there's always cheating in every election, but I don't think there was any kind of election fraud that was enough to make a difference during the 2020 elections. A lot of libertarians disagree with me, but those people absolutely believed it. And if you believe that an election was actually stolen by your rival political party, what would you do? Just step into their shoes for a second. Going and protesting is the rational thing to do. And I think it's become pretty obvious that they were egged into going into the Capitol. It doesn't mean it was right, but you need to take all of these circumstances into consideration. And those people are still rotting in jail. Meanwhile, people that inflicted all kinds of damages and terror into people during the BLM riots are free. You have people sitting in jail for years, whereas there's people who've assaulted people that are just getting sprung, on the daily. Oh, was it 2021? What year was it? 2021? Yeah, sorry. Oh, so that was a message right after. I'm sorry. I get really confused with dates. Thank you for correcting me, Hayden. Yeah, you're correct. I am so sorry. So yeah, this was a message that came out at the time. But we couldn't do that kind of messaging back during the BLM riots. And putting myself in the shoes of people that were involved in that movement, also, I can understand them being upset. I was very upset when I saw the police brutality. There's nothing right about that. It doesn't make destroying innocent people's property right. But I step back and go, okay, I want to understand these people rather than merely demonize them. But we couldn't be bothered to do that because Orange Man bad. And obviously, with the way the show opened, is if I've stopped my profanity-laced tirades against Trump even taking a look at the Libertarian Party, I am not a Trump fan. But I believe in being fair and not being puppets of the state and buying into the systematic demonization of half the country by a political party in power. It's absolutely freaking corrupt that they would do to us in a second. So yeah, that's the great messaging. That's the great messaging of the prior two terms. And if that's what you miss, perhaps you'd be at home in another party. All right, I'm going to give a few moments here for any additional comments. I'm sure there'll be some people upset at how harsh I was on the prior LNC. You can't be harsh enough to people who were given charge of our trust of the Party of Liberty that didn't do everything they could to make sure that the Party of Liberty spoke out against this stuff. And you want to know what? I don't think I did as much as I could, but I did more than they did. So normally I don't like calling out people like that, but those people deserve to be called out. And they ended up removing me for how strident I became progressively more so on that issue, and then exposing the corruption of JBH. He destroyed party property on his way out, and they couldn't even be moved to issue a resolution against him. But they removed me. He threatened to sue me for merely asking him a question, that if there was anyone else involved with this whole New Hampshire thing. He threatened to sue both me and Joshua Smith when he was chair. An LNC officer asking legitimate questions. He threatened to sue me. Corrupt. Absolutely corrupt. I know some people thinking, are you ever going to get over that? Nope. I'm never going to. I'm never going to get over it. Now, hopefully, I'll be able to... Thank you, Hayden, for the super chat. Hopefully, I'll get over it emotionally, and I haven't. I'm still very, very damaged by that. But I'm not going to get over it on principle. That was the lowest point in our party history. Absolute lowest point. Ron, well, I don't believe Angela was ever threatened to be sued. Perhaps she was, and I don't know about it. But I was threatened to be sued on the party list in front of everybody. Both me and Joshua Smith were. Absolutely shameful. And I am so grateful for the delegates at the last convention for voiding that shameful action. That at least redeemed one of the lowest points in our history. And I'm bound and determined that that doesn't happen to anyone ever again. And you want to know who was one of the spearheads of that? Radical Hogarth. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. None of those people should ever be elected to anything again unless they repent. Because at one point I'd said even if they repent, I was mad. There should always be a path for redemption for everybody. Even that doesn't mean that I'm ever going to let them back into my life. But there needs to be a path for redemption for them. On that particular issue. All right, so that is it for this evening. I'm thankful for the people mooning for the past to give me an idea for a show tonight. JJ, the lowest point in state party, I think, was probably the Massachusetts removals. But the Massachusetts removals would not have happened but for my removal. Because bad actors in state parties were emboldened by that. Will McVeigh even said so in his brief to the Judicial Committee. You removed the secretary you didn't like. Why can't I remove board members that some of us don't like? Unfortunately, Nathan, I will not be in Arizona for the convention. You guys moved your convention. Well, the date might have not been officially set, but you usually aren't the last week in January. You're normally the second or third week, and I was already committed to go to New Hampshire. And I did mention New Hampshire kerfuffle. That was the ostensible reason for removing me. But people forget that ever since that December meeting, I was really, really vocal with the LNC on COVID. Remember, in the evidence against me, the evidence of my wrongdoing, of my crimes, remember that one of those was a screenshot in which I said the party has spoken out about me 100 times more, and that's probably an underestimate, than they ever did about COVID. No lie detected. Absolutely true. They spent more time on me than they ever spent on COVID. Terrible people. Terrible people. And somebody had said they disagreed that JBH should never be in a position of leadership. I would agree there. I wasn't even thinking of him, to be honest with you, Dana. I was thinking more of some of the not chairs of the party. I was thinking of some of the LNC members. I was thinking more. I'm not going to name names again. I already named them. You all know who they were. I was speaking more of those people, not JBH. No, JBH destroyed party property. And he's actually left the party. Some of those other really terrible LNC members are still in the party. They haven't left the party. They're still in it. So, people can change, but they're going to have to give some really strong evidence of it. I will never let them in my life again. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have a path to redemption in the party itself. And I'm not including JBH. So hopefully I made that clear. And when it comes to COVID, as I said, John Phillips was really good on that. He has nothing to repent of on that. He was really good on that. The others, yeah. Bad, terrible. All right, so that is it for this evening. Ronwell asked if I can be in Illinois for the convention. I don't know when Illinois' convention is, and I might as well put this out here while we're all chatting. I do enjoy hanging out with you guys so much. That's why I kind of prolong these endings. I'm in New Hampshire because I'm retained as their parliamentarian. As y'all know, between the emotional turmoil and just the whole... Listen, when you get removed from a national committee, it hurts your reputation. I couldn't get a job for a long time because law offices Google you. That's just the way it is. And they don't want to know your story. They want people... if you're at a position of trust at the national level and you got removed, you think a job that requires you to have a position of trust is going to hire you? You guys ruined my life for a year. Fuck you. Not you in chat. I get so angry when I think about this. So, I've been financially devastated. That ruined my life. It's going to take me a decade to dig out of everything that's happened financially. Okay, so the way that relates to conventions is I can't afford to go to conventions unless I'm sent there, which is usually I'm retained by the party or a group within the party to do something for them. So New Hampshire is paying for my flight and my room. I'm donating my parliamentary services, and I'm their convention parliamentarian. I'm going to New Mexico because I'm their convention parliamentarian. So they're paying my way to go out there and paying for my hotel, and I'm donating my parliamentary services. I will go to any state convention, but I can't afford to do it myself. So, I always offer my parliamentary services, and if that's an option for some state parties, and no matter my strong opinions on so many issues, there's never been a state that I've been their parliamentarian at that has ever said I've been anything but unbiased and impartial. I take my duties in that regard very, very seriously. I'm very biased and very partial on my show, but I am not when I am in my professional capacity. And as I've often said, people know that I'm a Mises Caucus person. But the one member I've told chairs has been out of order more times than anyone else has been Michael Heiss, because I don't show favorites when I'm doing parliamentary services. I am absolutely and completely unbiased. What I am there is to make sure the rules are followed. And may the people who do the best following the rules win, even if it's not a group that I would have voted for if I were a voting delegate. Do I have a recommendation of a parliamentarian in Arizona? I don't know very many parliamentarians other than like JJ, and obviously Richard Brown, but he's the national parliamentarian. So unfortunately, I don't. But JJ might have some recommendations. JJ knows a lot more parliamentarians than I do, so perhaps he has a recommendation for one in Arizona. I always recommend, and I know this isn't necessary. To me, it's necessary, but it's not. Other people can disagree. For political parties, I really do think it's someone that knows the culture of the party. And libertarians are so weird. Like the parliamentarian you guys had last convention was really, really good parliamentarian, but didn't know the culture of the party at all. And I think that helps. But he was a very well-respected parliamentarian, and you certainly would not do poorly if just very serious and dressed like a funeral director, but a very good parliamentarian. Yeah, see, I give my services, but, most people, aren't going to do that. But perhaps, JJ might know somebody. I really wish I could be there. But unfortunately, I cannot. It's the first Arizona convention I've missed since 2017. Or is it 2018? It's been a while. I normally go to it because it's super cheap to go to Arizona, and y'all's are usually the first one of the year. But you're competing with New Hampshire this year. I'm kind of hoping Florida retains me again as their parliamentarian. It will be the third year in a row. If they do, Stephen Nikela, if you hear this, I'd love to come out. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Getting ready to spend some date night time with Wayne, and and I'll answer that question, William. Thank you so much for that question. And I hope I wasn't too off-putting with naming names this time. It does make me really uncomfortable. I don't like doing that, but sometimes it's necessary. William asked if there's going to be any future episodes of Cult of RONR. Yes, there will be. Mike Seebeck has moved away from Colorado, so my co-host moved to Alabama. We are still going to do a show together, but it will be with him remotely. But he hasn't moved into his new home yet and got settled with his new job. So once he is all settled in, we will do it again. There will be some episodes posted that are the larger marathons broken up by day. I'm working on that now, so you guys will be able to re-watch some of those. I am also going to do some Cult of RONR shows on my own. On just some specific issues that people have asked me to address. So I'll be doing some of those on my own, like I did always before. But Mike should be settled in by mid-January, and then we will start the show up again. And there will be some new topics because I'm working. I'm collecting credentials, I guess. So as JJ knows, I'm looking towards getting the AIP credential, and also eventually getting PRP designation with the National Association of Parliamentarians. Haven't had much time to dedicate to that, though I have really started looking into what I need to study and things for AIP, and I've actually bought a few of the books they recommended. What's the name? I just got it in, JJ. That concise, it's Canons, something parliamentary law. it was on their recommended reading list that you should be familiar with. It was the Standard Code. It was that short book, Canons, I think. I can't remember. And obviously, Roberts. So, that's probably a goal for the upcoming year, and want to look into getting my PRP. So yes, there will be. That's a long answer for yes, there will be more Cult of R&R. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Not sure what the next show is going to be. There probably will not be a show on tomorrow, on Sunday, or Monday. Tomorrow's an LNC meeting. So come to the LNC meeting. You need to pre-register at the link. And Monday is a LPCO board meeting that I go to. So there definitely will not be a show on Monday. Whether there's a show tomorrow or not, I don't know. Probably not, because the LNC meeting will last to 9 or 10 o'clock, though I might do an LNC recap afterwards, because otherwise it will be a while until I can do that. I have committee meetings all rest of next week, so if I do shows, which I obviously will try to do, they will be later in the evening, because I have Colorado Bylaws Committee on Tuesday. I forgot what's Wednesday. Thursday is the National Bylaws Committee. Friday is the Colorado Platform Committee. I'm a busy, busy, busy girl. I sounded like my bird. I have an African gray parrot. Her name is Annie, and she loves to say Annie girl, and then sometimes she draws it out and goes, Annie girl. I should bring Annie to one of the shows. She likes sitting on my lap. She's a cool little parrot. The other one I have, which Wayne calls the green fucker, he bites, so he's not one I'm going to bring down. But Annie I should bring to some shows. She's a cool bird. All right, you all, have an awesome night, and I hope to see you soon. And I do hope at least you found this informative as to where we came from. Bye-bye.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.